Today's GeoQuiz is divided into North and South. Two large islands make up most of the Pacific nation we're zeroing in on today. Its North and South Islands are divided by the Cook Strait, but it's the national capital we want you to name. The city, located on the southern tip of this country's North Island, has a population approaching 450,000. It's located in the windy latitudes known as the Roaring Forties. That makes it the southernmost capital in the world. European explorers who sailed this way in earlier centuries encountered indigenous islanders and called them Indians, but they call themselves by a different name. Their cultural history is on display in this city at the National Heritage Museum known as Te Papa, or simply Our Place. This museum and Chicago's Field Museum have a special relationship. We'll tell you why when we reveal the name of this capital city in 5. Time now to answer our GeoQuiz. The National Museum of New Zealand is located in the city of Wellington on New Zealand's North Island. A delegation from Chicago's Field Museum has traveled all the way to New Zealand for a special repatriation ceremony. Here's the world's David LaValle.
The trip to Wellington represents the end of a long, strange journey. In 1893, at the start of the World's Fair in Chicago, the Field Museum purchased a collection of human bones from a New York dealer. They are the remains of Maoris, the indigenous or first people of the islands of New Zealand.
That was back in the age when museums wanted to have collections not only of fish bones and fossil plants and so forth, but also representative samples of what it was like to be a human being physically around the world.
John Terrell is curator of Pacific anthropology at Chicago's Field Museum. In recent years, he says the museum forged friendships with Maoris in New Zealand and recognized the importance of returning the bones.
My understanding is that other museums returning human remains to New Zealand have basically packed them up and sent them off. This time around, I felt that it was really important for both personal reasons, but also as a statement to the world at large, that this wasn't just a return, but in fact, that we wanted to stand there in Wellington and sort of embrace the whole idea of showing this kind of respect to the ancestors of other people on Earth.
The remains consist of a preserved and tattooed head, as well as skeletal bones of 13 other Maori individuals. No one knows exactly who they are or precisely where the remains were collected, but Arapata Hakiwai regards them as sacred. He oversees the Maori collections at Te Papa Tongawera, the National Museum of New Zealand. He's been working to repatriate Maori remains that are held in as many as 150 museums worldwide. This week he went to Chicago to pack up and escort the remains home.
It's important because they represent our ancestors, our tipuna, and for Maori people in our culture, our ancestors are still very much living, if you like, in our culture and life.
Hakiwai says the repatriation process is a solemn affair. To better appreciate its significance, Hakiwai says it helps to understand how Maoris regard their history.
We have a word which means in front of us, which is mua, M-U-A, is actually a word we do use for our past. So it gives you an idea of I suppose, how we relate to our past and the relationships we have with our ancestors. In our culture, it's very real. It's who we are.
Hakiwai says he hopes this repatriation agreement with the Field Museum will encourage other museums to do the same. Meanwhile, the Maoris are giving something to the Field Museum. Earlier this year, members of the Maori community at Tokamaru Bay in New Zealand came to Chicago. They came to celebrate a Field Museum cultural exhibit that emphasizes their way of life. It's an intricately carved 19th century Maori meeting house. It's the only one in the U.S. Curator John Terrell says the exhibit is an example of a new trend to make museums a place for people to come and learn from each other.
Museums are not impersonal places where we simply exhibit material for people to come and gawk at or admire or even learn from, but museums are also places, and increasingly places, where we're reaching out to other people, other communities, other parts of the world to form partnerships. And this is a very real demonstration.
Terrell and Arapata Hakiwai of the New Zealand Museum are now in Wellington, where a ceremony to mark the repatriation of the Maori remains is set for Monday. Hakiwai says there will be Maori prayers and songs to celebrate his ancestors' homecoming. For the World, I'm David LaValle.